Hi there, and welcome to Smart and Savvy Unedited. I'm Debbie Davis.
I'm Debbie Kazunis. And I'm Carrie Baker.
And we have with us a wonderful guest. Her name is Julie Rabinowitz. She is the Director of Policy, Operations, and Communications for the Maine Department of Labor. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here this afternoon.
It is so fine to have you here. Now, tell me about your job, just a little. I know it's pretty involved, but you've got Director of Operations, Policy, and Communication.
Sure. So I work for the Maine Department of Labor, and I work in the Commissioner's office with Commissioner Jean Paquette, and I've been there for about 3.5 years now. And the Commissioner has been Commissioner for about the same amount of time, and I came to work under her. And we have a small team in the Commissioner's office, and we oversee the 5 bureaus that make up the department. So I think most people are familiar with the unemployment system. We run the state's unemployment insurance system and collect the employment taxes, the unemployment taxes that employers pay. We also manage wage and hour in the Bureau of Labor Standards, and we do workplace safety and health for the public sector. We do enforcement to make sure that the municipal governments and state government are following all the workplace health and safety laws. But we also have a consultation program that's at no cost for the private sector. So if they're concerned about their OSHA compliance, federal OSHA is always a concern because they can have very stiff fines if you're out of compliance. And we can provide consultation to make sure that your place is operating as safely as possible and that your workers are not going to run into significant problems. We also manage the labor market information gathering unit for the state, and that's our economists and statisticians who do the unemployment rate, which is comes out every month, and that most people are most familiar with. And then we have another bureau that most people don't associate with the Department of Labor, and that is actually vocational rehabilitation. A lot of people think that the employment services for people with disabilities and getting people trained, including individuals who are blind or deaf or suffering from vision or hearing loss, we manage the employment-focused programs for those individuals.
Wow.
And so that's part of our department. And then the most public-looking facing part of the department are the career centers, and our Bureau of Employment Services and the state's job bank is also part of us. So in my role, I am the public spokesperson for the department when reporters call and want information, but also am overseeing our legislative policy and our legislative docket and the kinds of policies we want to implement in the department. And then also on the operations side, tracking our budgets and some of our technology programs, because we have, running these systems we're hugely technology focused.
Yes.
And we're in the process of upgrading our technology systems. We have a lot of legacy systems that are way too old and very fragile.
Wow.
I'm exhausted listening to this.
It's like, phew.
We have a lot going on. We have a lot going on at the
What
department.
is your favorite part of your job?
I think educating people about all the things that we actually do. I think many people see the Department of Labor, a lot of employers see it just as those auditors who come in.
Yes, right. You're familiar with that, right, Carrie?
Our commissioner is very focused on explaining and demonstrating in customer service that we have 2 customers. We have the job seekers and workers on one side, and then we have the employers. So it's about educating people about the law so they're better at complying with the law and being that assistance so that they can call when they have a question. We would rather you ask and we help you to do it correctly than we have to get the complaint and do the investigation and then maybe find out you did do it correctly or that you didn't do it correctly and we need to take some corrective action. We would rather provide that assistance up front.
What is your, I'm sorry, is it okay? What is your background? What makes you the expert in all of this?
That's a good question because
because you're
well, I came as a communications director initially and have grown in familiarity, and then the person who was our legislative lead and policy director, she was was ill and then ended up needing to leave, and they needed literally someone to go stand over at the legislature and read testimony, and they were like, oh, Julie, you can do that too. So we kind of rolled it all together. But
that's interesting.
Yeah.
It is a huge job.
We have a lot going on, and we have about 500 employees across the state, and including the Unemployment Trust Fund, we have a budget of about $300 million. So we're not as large as a DHHS, but we play a very significant role, and we're regulating every workplace in the state and every employer-employee relationship. So it's really an important job that we have to make sure that employers have what they need to do their jobs and operate their businesses, and the workers have what they need, and also all the work that we do around unemployment and reemployment and helping people connect with training and identifying a career path. And then when there's a layoff, and we talk about the mills a lot, but when there is a layoff, that we are there to assist people with what their options are and help them make decisions in a really stressful time. So it's a pretty impressive team that we have, and all the different kinds of things that we do.
I liked what you said about employers. You want them to ask questions.
Yes.
You want them to come to you and, have you explain what needs to be done beforehand. Is that always the case, or?
I think that has not been the case in the past, and largely a lot of employers don't even want to call because they're afraid that if they call and ask the question, we're going to flag them for an audit. The next thing they know, someone will be knocking on the door, and it doesn't work that way. We want to provide, the commissioner says we want to give you the answers before we give you the test.
Right.
And so we've done a lot of work under the LePage administration and Commissioner Paquette to set up workshops where we educate employers, and to go out to trade and professional associations and their conferences and do workshops. We do a lot of work with the Human Resources Society in the state, and we do a lot of work with several of the different chambers and some of the other places there that are natural business associations where we can do that kind of outreach.
That's where I know Jean. She's wonderful, by the
Jean
way.
Paquette, yes, she is.
But the HR conference, the big one that Maine hosts in May, wonderful. I mean, you're always there.
Yes.
Is it effective? Are the employers coming out?
Yes, we actually did a survey. We had about 10,000 employer emails that we gathered through various programs that we're running, and asked, have you seen a change in the way that the Department of Labor provides services from about 5 years ago to now? And even looking back 5 years ago, that was really the heat of the recession still, and really coming out of the recession. So our department, our workload is counter-cyclical with the economy. So when the economy is bad, our workload goes way up. And then as we come out, typically it goes down. But right now, Maine's really in an interesting transition because we are the oldest state in the nation. We have this wave of baby boomers who are going to start to retire or cut down their hours or change the kind of work that they're doing. And then we don't have as many younger people to take those jobs. So we're really looking at the shrinking of our workforce. How do we meet the needs of our citizens? How do we continue to provide essential services? When you talk about the senior housing and care for the elderly, someone has to be there and staff those programs. And we need people to move to the state, and that's why talking about tax reform and what makes Maine competitive, it's not just about the people here. It's about when people are making choices as to where to move and what businesses we want to attract. It's about having the choice there that makes Maine the attractive choice. So they don't move to a New Hampshire or Florida or a Texas because we need those people and those workers. And we especially need younger families who are going to have kids here and raise their families here.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So does the low unemployment in this state a factor then? I mean, we're lower than the national average.
Right.
And so with an older state and the retirement the way it is, we actually need more workers coming.
Yes,
and
desperately.
that's where interesting. And are we looking for more educated employees, or what's the demographic that we're looking for in the employment field right now?
That's a really good question. So when we look at the workforce shrinkage,
Right.
we are projecting, our economists are projecting about a shortfall of potentially 109,000 workers by 2030, 2032. So we have a net loss in our workforce between the retirees aging and retiring out and the younger people coming in of about 100,000. So some of that is going to be automated away. You know, advances in technology. So you may go to the restaurant and instead of having one waitress, you're going to have a server who brings you food, but you're going to put all your orders in through an iPad kind of device. So, and those are, some of them, those jobs are minimum wage jobs. Some of them are actually more middle wage kinds of jobs. But those are the jobs that, you know, we talk about the erosion of the middle class. Some of those things that have been automated in factories and those kinds of technology jobs, those were the middle class. You could have that job with a high school diploma. You didn't need an advanced degree. Now the jobs that we have tend to be on the human capital, labor-intensive, you know, personal care. When we think about the aging population, who comes to your house to help you if you're elderly, or helps you in the nursing home, a lot of healthcare professions. Those are human capital intensive. We also are going to need those high-tech skills because those are the higher level management and how to run the computer, precision manufacturing, IT. So we do need that higher level degree, particularly STEM degrees, but people with higher levels of education. So when we look at this situation, we have a skills gap between people who are leaving or in the workforce now but don't have the advanced degrees to get up the career ladder.
Right.
And then we also have a little bit of a geographic mismatch because we have a lot of jobs on the coast. We have a lot of seasonal jobs on the coast. And then we have a lot of people in the rim counties that are losing their manufacturing base when these mills close. And we have had a different kind of economic shift. Also, you know, when the mill closes, logging loses jobs. So it's a real difficult situation to look at. There's not one fix you can make, but it's trying to look at the whole economy and what are the best things that we can do and the most strategic things that we can do to attract people here and to keep these people here to help our economy grow.
Interesting.
How is our legislative body helping that situation? Now, you are up there.
Yes.
You're seeing policy made.
Yeah.
Are you seeing bills that are helping that to happen?
I think that a lot of times legislation tends to focus on a short-term fix. And this problem is not, this didn't just happen, you know, last week or last month or last year. This is because people in the 90s who lived here in Maine didn't have as many kids as people who lived here in Maine in the 70s and the 60s. So this shortage of workers has been brewing for decades, and no one has really tackled it yet. And now, as we approach the crisis situation, there has been initiatives that have looked at serving people's needs, senior housing, healthcare. But you need workers. No one's going to move to Maine to drive the senior bus. The senior bus is driven by a retiree who's a local person who wants to pick up extra money.
Yes.
You know, so what are the jobs that people are going to move here for? And that's when you're really trying to attract the bigger businesses. So what are the strategic economic decisions that we can make? You know, making Maine a right-to-work state. You know, West Virginia is about to vote to become a right-to-work state. That is fascinating, and that is the coal mine,
It's big.
birth of union labor movement. But what are the things that are going to make Maine more competitive and attract these businesses? And then having those larger businesses here to replace the bigger businesses that we've lost. I mean, Biddeford lost Hostess 3 years ago.
No, certainly did.
And now it's taken 3 years to get FedEx there. A totally different kind of business, a totally different kind of workforce.
I just, well,
Can I? I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, go ahead.
Can I ask one question? How are our wages, the wage compared to, wage for a job compared to Massachusetts wage compared to job? Because the cost of living is, Massachusetts is a big, you know, we think of it's a big state, it's more populated. You have the
Right.
Boston area, obviously. But Maine is not an inexpensive place to live.
Right.
Right.
So where are our wages, comparatively speaking? So if I'm an IT person, and there are some great IT companies here, and I'm looking at, you know, potentially taking a job, but I have an opportunity to take a job somewhere else outside of Maine, in New England. You know, how are we stacking up? I mean, cost of living, even a place to live, you know, and cost of oil and how to heat your home, and all of those things that, you know, that
Our groceries
Right.
cost more,
Right.
everything.
very difficult to. I'm just curious,
Yeah.
how is that? How are we beginning to compete with the neighboring states?
Well, there's a couple factors there. First of all, when we look at straight wages, Maine's 46th in the country. You know, the governor's constantly railing that we're 49th in this and 48th in that, and it's true. So we're 48th. We are, of the right to work states, we are second to last. Of the non-right to work states, we're second to last in wages. The only
Wow.
one behind us is Wyoming, and that's right now. There's 25 right-to-work states. So exactly half the country is right to work and half the country is not. On the non-right-to-work states, we're only third from the bottom. So, you know, I said to the legislature, I'd rather be first in wages on the right to work than at the bottom of
Sure.
wages on,
Yeah, I know.
you know, and we're only 46 anyway. So Massachusetts, the wages are much higher. There's a higher density of companies. And that's part of the issue, too, is that if you just have one company that does that particular thing, if someone moves here from out of state, what's their plan B if that doesn't work out? Is there another company that they can go work at? Is there a company
Exactly.
Yeah.
that their spouse can go work at?
Right, sure.
And it's really looking at what are the clusters of the skill sets and how you can be employable. And then when you have multiple companies there, they're competing for the talent. That's what drives wages up. So people who move here to Maine are making a decision to move to Maine.
Yes.
And they're bringing their family with them, and we need to have all the choices, as many choices as we can, to make that a competitive choice for them and to make them feel that they're making the right choice for their family and that it's not a risky choice.
But I don't know, maybe it's me. I don't see it happening for Maine. I don't see solutions going to solve the problem of that 100,000 people leaving the workforce, because I don't see our legislative people passing policy that's going to be helpful in attracting people to Maine.
Well,
Is it me,
the
or-
cries are going to get louder. We're hearing them now at the department. In York County in particular, we actually had members of the congressional delegations, Maine staff, come to the department and say, we're hearing from employers, they're calling us that they can't find workers. So we know it's happening. York County has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the state. For the month of December 2015, it was 3.5%.
Was it?
And last year, the same month, was 5%. So in 1 year, York County's unemployment rate dropped a point and a half.
Great news for York, if you're a York County
But does that, I'm
person.
sorry,
Right.
not to be a naysayer, but you know, as we know that on a political, the national
Yep.
scale, you know, we all know that the numbers on I'm not saying that in Maine, but on a national level, it doesn't include those who've just dropped out of the workforce. So How can you explain
Sure,
that to us?
sure. So when we look at the unemployment rate, what we're counting, there's several different levels that we count, and the one that we typically talk about is called the U3 rate, and that is anyone who is actively looking for work. So if you said, I'm not looking right now,
Right.
then you're not counted. If you're working part-time, you took a part-time job for economic reasons, that you couldn't find a full-time job, for example, then you would be counted in the, they call it the U6. So when people talk about the real unemployment rate, they tend to talk about this U6 rate, which counts people who are marginally connected to the workforce, working part-time for economic reasons. But if you are retired and you're not looking for work, you're not considered unemployed. If you are on welfare and not looking for work, you're not considered unemployed. So when we talk about the labor force and who is working and who wants to work and is looking for work, as opposed to everyone of a working potential age.
So
Because there's some people who don't want to work.
There's a large
Stay-at-home
segment
moms.
then that's not being counted.
Well, there's people who are of working age, but a stay-at-home mom is deliberately making a choice to not work
Right.
while she's raising her kids, or a stay-at-home dad for that matter, it doesn't matter. Or you could be retired and volunteering, no matter what your age, but you're not technically working because you're not looking, or in the labor force because you're not looking for work. So statistics get tricky, and it's really about what does Maine need? We need everyone who wants to work, whether it's part-time, full-time, to be able to access meaningful employment.
I think I can drive a senior bus.
You could do a lot. You could do a lot of things.
I could drive a senior
You do a lot. You could do, yeah.
That'd be the
Wow.
funnest bus ever.
It would. Strap yourselves in.
Ming would be driving.
Here we go.
Okay, you ready?
But we joke, but a lot of retirees actually, it's a very necessary part of our workforce. We have a lot of people who come and want to just do 20 hours a week in the summer.
Right.
And we need that seasonal employment. And York
Right.
County in particular needs that
Yeah.
seasonal employment
Right.
because for employers who are looking for workers and trying to keep those baby boomers who have tremendous institutional knowledge from walking out the door with all of that value that just can't be easily transferred to your new hire, no matter what their age. You know, how do we keep that person attached and working at our business a little longer than maybe they would? Maybe we plan the retirement transition as a series of steps down in hours, or we bring them back on as a consultant during certain periods of time. There's a lot of different strategies, but we need to be working at both ends of the spectrum, attracting younger people to the state and retaining our older workers as long as we possibly can to kind of manage this.
Yeah. I was going to say, my mom owns a restaurant in Orchard Beach and has for the last 45 years, and it's getting harder and harder to find waitresses, waiters to work in the restaurant. And I know a lot of, for example, other restaurants and hotels and motels in the area are looking to people with maybe some, green cards, foreign, the foreign butlers that come in for seasonal work, which is crazy.
There's several different foreign worker programs that happen. There's a couple that the State Department of Labor certifies in some of the programs that employer has actually looked for local workers. So there is, in the H2 programs, H2B, H2A, there is a requirement that they hire local workers. There's another program called the J1 visa program that's run by the U.S. State Department, and those are a lot of summer camp counselors and wait staff at restaurants along the coast. And that program is run entirely by the State Department. I say the State Department, but meaning the U.S. State Department. Right. Yeah. The State Department of Labor, the Maine Department of Labor, has no role, and we don't even know how many of those workers come every year. Wow. We only find out from Homeland Security, usually about 18 months after that season has happened. Wow. So we'll be getting the 2014 numbers, and they're just kind of published on the Homeland Security website. So there's a lot of dynamics about employment in Maine that are unusual. we have the highest swing in seasonal employment, or the second highest
yeah.
swing, I think, only behind Alaska right now. We
Wow.
gain 38,000 jobs every summer as a net.
Yeah. You mentioned, or before we had you come onto the set, that the Maine State DOL, Department of Labor, doesn't address the regs around the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
So that would be the federal.
So some of that's the federal U.S. Department of Labor, and some of it's the federal DHHS.
I'm just wondering, in your opinion, do you think that those new regulations that have burdened our, especially our seasonal workforce, have you seen that come into play since the implementation of the law, which was, the regulations really kicked in last year, really, I mean, fully.
Yeah, yeah. I think it has played a role in the recovery in a couple of different ways. In going out and talking with individual employers, the Commissioner and I and others in our department have been out having these kinds of discussions. You know, what are you doing? What are your hiring trends? What's going on? Many employers have been looking to keep either their number of employees under that cap, or their number of part-time employees under the 29, 30-hour-a-week threshold, so that they wouldn't be eligible. And so if you worked at a restaurant as a server and you worked, say, 50 hours a week, now you're being cut down to 29 hours. Now you're, and that's where when we talk about the unemployment rate, the U6 number, you're working part-time for economic reasons. Now you have to have 2 part-time jobs to make up what your full-time job was. And it's those kinds of unintended consequences that I think we see in those higher U6 numbers. But there's no true correlation, and the Obama administration changed some of the questions that are asked in some of those surveys, so there's no before and after data for us to look at. So,
well, that is
very interesting.
Not surprising at all to me.
No, not at all.
Very interesting.
But that makes me sad, because we are already struggling in Maine, and I was in the business of selling insurance, health benefits, and seeing and did listen very intently, especially to DOL. About the regs and their concerns at a federal level about how this is going to come down and affect the employers everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just it's a tough situation.
Yeah, there's a lot of those federal changes nationally that haven't been on people's radar screens that potentially could have some major effects. There's a proposal right now at USDOL that is being reviewed, and the rules are supposed to come out in July, and that would double the payment that you have to pay to keep someone as a salaried exempt employee. So right now, if you want to have someone not being paid as an hourly minimum wage overtime eligible employee, and you want to switch them to a salary, you are going to have to go from paying them $455 minimum a week, which is about $23,000, to about $50,000 a year.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness!
Whose
And
idea
that's going to
was
have
this?
tremendous effects in Maine.
It's going to
gonna
just
be crazy.
that will just kill businesses in Maine.
Of course it will.
I mean, that is just the most scary thing I've ever heard. When I had my own firm, I had 1 part-time employee. Everybody else was full-time salaried. Because I was a lazy employer, I don't want to babysit my employees, and everybody who worked with me were the consummate professionals. I never had to worry. But my one, and this is where I learned of the minimum and how much the salary needed to be. If I wanted to make this person a salaried employee,
Right. Yep.
I had to pay a minimum of this for her salary. I will tell you that I was in a position that could easily meet that. I exceeded that, but I thought that was a very interesting rule. And for them to double it in Maine, it will just be.
That's crazy.
Beyond, it will be like going from minimum wage to $25 an hour. I mean, I don't even know.
Well, and then we have the statewide minimum wage referendum,
Right.
which would affect your minimum wage and hourly employees. And then at the same time, we'll be getting the rules this summer, and really employers are going to be looking at both ends of the options of how you pay some workers. Some workers cannot be considered an exempt employee, but many workers can. But that's an exemption that the employer chooses to hold. So if you are as a worker, you should be concerned, because if you're currently on salary, you get, and you're exempt, you get a lot of benefits from that. You can come in a little late or leave a little early for a doctor's appointment or picking up your kids or to take a class, and you're not penalized in your paycheck for that. But you're expected that if you got to work a little late, some nights you're going to work a little late or work through your lunch hour. If the employer says, I can't, you're making $40,000 now, and I've got 5 people at that level, so if I have to bring you all up to $50,000, that's $50,000. So instead, I'm going to put you all as hourly overtime.
Wow.
Now you lose that exemption, you lose that flexibility as a worker, and you're probably going to have a change in your title or your job duties so that that aligns with the information and the position. And so I think a lot of people are going to be really surprised when these get rolled out. Well, you know, the Obama administration was not successful in raising the minimum wage on a federal level. So to attack what they perceive as income inequality, they have decided to do this for the exempt employees and the rules.
See, again,
it will be challenged, but they got 250,000 comments on the rules this summer when they had the public comment period.
But this again does not, the big business, mega business, they are not, they can deal with it. They have the manpower.
Right, it's the small businesses,
the small business,
and the nonprofits that are going to be
oh my gosh, the nonprofits.
hugely
it will kill. It
devastated.
Will just, it'll be devastating.
He's going to hurt nonprofits, which is what he is always been championed for.
Yeah.
So he's going to hurt his own.
So we're concerned about layoffs. We're concerned about all of the fallout from whatever the final rule is.
Well.
There's always something going on.
There certainly is.
Yep.
Wow.
Well, we're in a short session. What bills are you looking at?
We have several carryover bills that we're working on right now. One has to do with severance pay, and you know, as the mills close, there's only certain kind of businesses that are eligible for this specific law about mandating some kind of payment if you've shut the doors or you've moved out of state. We were able to secure severance pay in the Bucksport Verso mass layoff there when that facility closed, and we learned some things from the litigation that resulted, and so we're trying to update the statute to reflect that. There was a bill a concept bill to reform some parts of the unemployment system, and the concept never was fleshed out, but we were actually able to use that to fund some more job training for the competitive skills scholarship program, and so that is moving along and hopefully will be passed. And that should result in training an additional 1,000 workers across the state with certificates, associate degrees, and bachelor's degrees, which in high-wage, in-demand fields. That program, you just can't go in and tell us you want to be a, political anthropologist. You have to come in and tell us that you want to, that you want to try for something that's going to be in demand and a secure future.
Is there such a thing as a political anthropologist?
There's all kinds. I'm sure there's all kinds of things. So we nursing, all kinds of different degrees, healthcare, precision manufacturing, but a lot of other things to qualify for that program. And then we have a big bill that we've been working on for the past year, and a report coming out on Maine's drug testing statute for workplace drug testing. But the time right now with the opiate problem, with medical marijuana in the work, because people are legitimately taking medical marijuana, and some medical marijuana products have no impairment. They have no psychoactive
like
kind
tinctures, creams.
And other ones do. And so how is an employer to know? And with HIPAA laws and privacy and disability rights, there's a lot of gray area. So we really want to kind of focus in on this. We've had a research group looking at it. And then also there's the referendum on legalizing marijuana, which has many employers very concerned about what the effect of that would be in their workplace. Because if you do a drug test and marijuana pops up, if you have a certification for medical marijuana, then that falls under HIPAA and some other protections, and the medical review officer may not disclose that to the employer, and there's some justification from that. But if you pop positive for marijuana and it's legal, the employer doesn't know when you took it.
Right.
So there's a lot of issues around that. So what we're proposing is to not just look at the test, but to train employers how to assess impairment and give professional training and impairment assessment, and then a follow-up procedure as to how that impairment is assessed medically, and have a plan to really make sure that the individual is fit for duty, as opposed to just trusting that they really did it a week ago and not this morning in their car.
Wow.
For safety-sensitive positions. We're not trying to test everybody, but
for
people,
drivers,
I
I mean,
see.
there
Forklift
drivers,
or your nurse, or the person who. I mean, there's a lot of
Physician,
to make sure that
dentist.
that your medical professions, anyone who's dealing in safety sensitive, whether it's a client care kind of position, or a manufacturing position, or they're driving the forklift, that they're mixing chemicals, that they are not impaired, because the safety of their coworkers as well as their clients depends on them.
You know, is it me? To me, this is crazy. This is not what Maine business needs at this time.
Well, you know, in Colorado, so the work that we're doing at the Department of Labor and the work group that we've established, and the support that we've gotten from several legislators, including Senator Cushing and Joel Steckes Representative Steckes on the LCRIC committee. You know, we are a national leader in doing this research and coming up with this model. Colorado and Washington State are both looking at us because of this. Colorado has, we were just, one of our Bureau of Labor Standards director was talking to her counterpart there, and you know, just the wages, because the banks won't take the marijuana companies, because it's a federally prohibited drug, they don't want to be seen as laundering drug money. Right. So how do you pay your wages if you can't use a bank? So some of that's already been worked out in Maine with the medical marijuana industry, but the Colorado Department of Labor has like a whole unit who just deal with these questions related to marijuana and the economic side of marijuana, and then also the after effects and enforcement issues related to marijuana, like drug testing and things like that. There's a lot of interesting things that come into play.
Crazy, crazy times. Now, I would like to know about Usher syndrome.
Okay.
Tell me about it.
So, as I mentioned, the Maine Department of Labor deals with vocational rehabilitation and helping people who have different types of disabilities, and runs the gamut to find employment. But we actually house within the department all the services for individuals who are blind or visually impaired. And we provide the training from birth to death, because if you lose your vision, learning how to get around and how to do the activities of daily living and getting around work, they're pretty much the same whether you're a small child or you're in your 30s or 40s, or if you're a senior person losing their eyesight who wants to stay in their home. So we provide all those services, in particular in the communities of Biddeford and the Franco-American heritage communities in Maine. We're talking about Usher syndrome, which is where you lose your hearing or partially lose your hearing, but you also lose your eyesight, so you have a dual sensory impairment. And it's prevalent in Franco-American lineage. So
I've never heard of it
I
before.
didn't either.
I didn't know that.
Yes, so we are reaching out to let people know that if they do have a loved one who has some kind of vision loss and some kind of hearing impairment, that we do have specialized services available. And anyone who has any disability who's interested in not working but interested in coming back to work or starting to work, we can assist folks with that and finding the support and training and identifying what kind of career they want to do. But for the Usher syndrome support in particular, we are the resource, and we encourage people to talk to their doctors.
That's interesting.
And to call the department.
Do you help them, I mean, do you go so far as to help them with hearing aids or not?
We may pay for hearing aids or assist them in finding hearing aids. Maine Care pays for one hearing aid. If you're going to be employed, we may be able to assist the individual in having two hearing aids. But we can also teach people how to do things that keep them active and independently living longer in their homes.
Yes.
So if you're losing your vision, it's about you know, pouring liquids, cooking. How do you do some of those things that so you don't burn yourself, and so you don't, you know, that you can pick out the clothes in as your vision fades, that you can find that this is navy blue and this is black, and you know, those kinds of things. So we have strategies. Some of it's very high tech, and we have high tech technology we can provide, and some of it is really just low tech. It's, you know, maybe a ping pong ball in your cup.
I had no idea that the Department of Labor handled
Neither did I. You guys
at
do
all.
a
Yeah,
I mean,
we
this,
do a lot of different things. Yeah,
I mean,
and
that's-
usually they say, "Oh, well, that was DHHS," and I'm the reporters, and I know.
No.
That was us.
I would have assumed
That's
it would have
Julie.
been fallen under that umbrella.
Oh,
That
which
you,
is
I
so
really learned
very
something new today.
interesting.
Well, if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask Julie about work or any of the programs that they have down at the Department of Labor, you can give her a call at 207-621-5009, or you can send her an email at julie.rabinowitz@maine.gov, and I'm sure it's going to be right at the bottom of the screen because we have awesome producers here. Julie, thank you so
That
much
was
for
great.
joining
Thank you
us
very
today.
much.
Wonderful
And I should
information.
make a plug for the York County Career Center, which is in Springvale. If people are
Yes.
looking for work, or an employer wants to help find workers, and they're the ones calling and saying, "I can't find anybody," we can help, and we have some local resources right here to help in training and connecting people with a new career.
Fantastic.
That is
Good stuff.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Great information.
Thank you for having me. This
you.
was so much fun.
Wonderful
We'll have
guest.
you back in the future.